Hello, my friends. I stole that opening from Nick Cruz of Fred Hampton Left Us. Sorry. He's a cool guy. Great channel. So I'm nearing the end of these Halloween 2021 offerings. I believe this is part 11. I think I'm going to barely have part 12 done in time for All Hallows Day or All Saints Day tomorrow. Monday. Today's the 30th. So I'm just getting this one in just in time for October 31st. I have to work all day on Halloween, and I'm just not sure with my current sleep issues if I'm going to be able to do a video tomorrow. So this is like carpe diem here. So I'm going to first talk about Bug. Bug is a film that's not yet on Blu-ray, and it's really kind of a crime against humanity. It's a 2006 film by William Friedkin. The DVD is out of print, but it is currently streaming on Tubi. Of course, Tubi's got like everything. So this film, it's my favorite film by far by William Friedkin, and I've seen almost all of his films. The Exorcist is incredible for what it is, which is a lot. As far as a iconoclastic, kind of thought-provoking treatise on faith by William Peter Blatty, I would say Blatty's own film, The Ninth Configuration, is vastly better than The Exorcist. And this is not to diss The Exorcist. When I first saw it, believe me, I was 12 years old. I was that old when I first saw it, and it still scared the hell out of me. And that was the cut version, the network TV version. It was rough, and it still scared me for years later, even after I made myself a copy and watched it a few times. It took a while to shake that kind of creepy feeling, especially if I watched it, alone at night. It doesn't faze me now. I do think it's pretty effective, but it's more effective if you watch it a lot less often than I used to, for sure. Definitely a classic. Friedkin's done several great movies and several kind of movies. Among his great movies, I personally would count To Live and Die in L.A., Sorcerer. But Bug is kind of a late career resurgence for him. He teamed up with this screenwriter, Tracy Letts, for two films. This one and I believe 2011 was Killer Joe with Matthew McConaughey. Both were written by Tracy Letts based on his plays. And Friedkin's direction is immaculate, especially on Bug. He takes kind of a set-bound story and opens it up visually in every way possible. Camera work is exquisite. He kind of combines a lot of traditional camera work with a lot of weird kind of close-ups and long takes, like long holds on seemingly harmless objects, and brings a lot of menace to them because there's kind of this, the whole film has this kind of stewing vat of paranoia going through the whole film. And that's because really, and the reason I think this is such an effective horror film is because it's truly just purely psychological horror. I mean, it's about mental illness, and I mean, it's really if you've had mental illness or know someone with mental illness, experienced anything even remotely like this, and most of us who've experienced some mental illness have not experienced anything as crazy as, pardon the pun, as the characters in this film have, thankfully. But still, you can kind of, you feel it at times. Basically, it's only a handful of characters. The main character, Agnes, is played by the great Ashley Judd. This must be her masterpiece. The first time I saw this movie, I was kind of blown away. And there's a segment near the very end, which I'll talk about later, a famous segment where I feel like she's breaking into a whole nother level here with the acting. Transcendant, you know, because her character is like really kind of having an epiphany, but it's not something that's real. You know, it's total psychosis, and as an actress, it's revelatory to watch her. I mean, her work, and um, Agnes is basically a kind of person that I knew a lot growing up in Charlotte, North Carolina. Uh, you know, this is I forgot what state this is in. I can't remember if it's the deep South, Midwest. I don't know, but there's a lot of rednecks and partying and drug using and rock and roll and bars, and uh, I've encountered many people like that. Charlotte's a bit more how do we say gentrified nowadays. Um, but growing up, you know, I mean, and I only live like a couple miles from South Carolina, and South Carolina is really, in a lot of ways, still like that. Um, but basically, we're talking about like working class people, people raising families, people uh, who basically party to kind of take their mind off their poor socioeconomic status in society. The kind of people that are kind of really feel left behind and bitter nowadays. You know, I don't say that I agree with all of these people culturally, and I agree with all of them ideologically, but as far as socioculturally, socioeconomically, I totally identify with them, and they're not all bad people. Agnes is kind of uh, atypical even among that scene. Like her best friend, played by I believe Lynn Collins, who's kind of a chameleon, and it's during this period played a lot of kind of bombshell knockout women roles, which is somewhat warranted. She's striking, but then I don't know. She played Deja Thoris in John Carter Mars. She played Silver Fox in Wolverine Origins. Uh, you know, she's kind of she can play ethnic characters, even though I don't think really she's that ethnic. In this one, she plays a blonde kind of metalhead chick who's a lesbian, and but again, she's kind of like the foxy friend to the more bedraggled Agnes. But of course, Ashley Judd really is actually more beautiful. She's very scrawny in this. I mean, Ashley Judd is not exactly voluptuous anyway, but she is it's remarked by other characters how skinny she is and gaunt, and really she's in kind of a permanent depression. She's living in this place called the Rustic Motel, and rustic it is, and you know she lives alone. I don't know. I think she must be on. No, she does work, and you know, kind of a below paying job, and then hangs out sometimes at this lesbian bar with RC, her friend played by Lynn Collins. These are salt of the earth people, but Agnes is dissociated even in that world, you know, and maybe she doesn't fit in anywhere. She's kind of uh, been torn loose from the moorings uh, of a social life or any kind of security, mainly because her ex-husband was an abusive asshole and he went to prison. He's played by Harry Connick Jr. And I don't know, Harry Connick Jr. must be a guy, he doesn't act very often, but he must be an actually great actor because, you know, this character is like a loathsome, he's like the archetypal possessive ex boyfriend, ex husband, redneck, macho, controlling, violent, ignorant, stupid, rude ass fuck that you've known many times before. And again, there are a lot of guys like that around here, that, especially that I grew up near, and some of my generation have ended up being that way. Um, so he must be a great actor because I'm assuming he's nothing like that in real life, based on his general persona as a musician. Um, kind of a lightweight persona, really, as a musician. So to see him kind of buffed up and just nasty and misogynistic piece of shit is quite a feat. So he goes to prison after their son Lloyd, who's 6, is snatched from a supermarket, never to be found, and he ends up in prison. And Agnes keeps looking, and finally, a couple of years before this film opens, she's given up by her own admission, um, and she's really given up in every way, given up hope, pretty much. Um, she's really a tragic figure as a character. Um, so Goss, played by Harry Connick, the ex-husband, he makes harassing phone calls, and he finally bursts his way into the place and pretty much acts as though he owns her, and he's going to come and go as he wants. He takes money out of her purse. He's really a fucking pig. The worst thing about this movie, here's my first spoiler, and you're going to be very disappointed, especially if you start watching this movie and see him. My very biggest disappointment in this movie is that his character doesn't suffer violent mutilation and murder. Um, there's no justice in the world. Uh, so into these people's lives comes this guy named Peter Evans, played by Michael Shannon, a really unconventional looking guy. He's made a modern career, as something that's kind of not that prevalent in modern Hollywood anymore, the character actor. And he is intense in this. The first thing I saw Michael Shannon in was the horrible movie A Man of Steel by Zack Snyder, which I just think is one of the worst films I've seen in recent years, or that's been made in recent years. And he's pretty insufferable in that film. And I kept thinking, why did they cast General Zod as this guy who's kind of homely, and he gave him a weird haircut, and what's up with that after Terrence Stamp, who's so classy and attractive. But of course, I watched a little bit of Man of Steel after I'd seen Bug, not immediately after, and I realized that actually Michael Shannon was by far the best thing about Man of Steel, and he did the best with what he had, and I got why they cast him. It was like against casting, and that's because Zack Snyder's a visionary genius. Just kidding. But yeah, I mean, that was an attempt on his part, I think, to be go against the grain casting wise. And it kind of backfired to anyone with a really discerning eye. And I think I have somewhat of a discerning eye when it comes to films, especially superhero films. And because Shannon has infinitely more charisma than the cardboard cutout Henry Cavill, who I think is really the worst Superman that I've ever seen among many that I've seen. I'm very much in the minority with this opinion, but y'all are just going to have to live with it. So anyway, back to him in Bug. Bug was several years before the unfortunate Man of Steel. He's intense in this. He's kind of he's an intense guy. He's usually very intense, and sometimes he's very villainous in his roles, like in Shape of Water. He's really a weird, sexually repressed government bureaucrat guy. In this movie, he is sympathetic up to a point. He's sympathetic once you realize, especially, that he is just hopelessly mentally ill, schizoaffective, and paranoid, delusional disorders. And but at first, you're not sure. I mean, he seems like a misfit. He seems like he's trying not to encroach on Agnes's life. Basically, what's her name? RC. I was going to say LG. That's the character in Texas Chainsaw 2. RC, like the cola, which was made here in the Carolinas. RC brings him home. He's just some guy hanging out at the bar. She thinks he's pretty cool. I don't know if she's trying to hook Agnes up with him because Agnes is lonely and he's lonely. I'm not sure about that. But at first, she's very positive about this guy, and she kind of leaves him to stay there. He doesn't have anywhere to live. He's between addresses, as he says. He's homeless, in other words. And she lets him stay on the couch, and he is kind of a weird, awkward guy, but he's also very intelligent. He's polite, and he's of course very, as you can imagine, very incensed by her ex-husband's behavior. But he's also very subdued. He doesn't do what you're kind of hoping he will do and beat the shit out of the guy. If anything, he kind of acts very meek, which of course guys like that, Goss, thrive on that. Uh, they're incensed if they don't get a reaction out of you because they don't like it when their aggression is met with passive aggression. Um, so basically, Agnes is off work for a day, and what a day it is. As the night, the second day unfolds, um, Peter is still hanging around, and then he gets a little paranoid and leaves. Comes back, and uh, they bond in this bizarre way, and she's very lonely and fascinated. As she said, "I love to hear you talk to him." And so there you go. You can already tell she's falling for him. When a woman who's not like, I guess, super attuned to these kind of wild ideas that he's into says, longingly, "I love to hear you talk," and you kind of know that it doesn't really matter what he says. She's into him. So she does have sex with him, and it's a very beautiful scene, very nicely done, very sensual, and and somewhat graphic. I mean, these two are. I'm just going to tell you, both of these actors are totally naked through swaths of this movie. So if you're desperate to see either of them naked and haven't before, this is your chance. Um, so uh, they make love, and yeah, they make love, and they're after that, they don't really have much of a sex life, but they have this incredible bond. She begins to feel like he's the only person she has. It's kind of pitiful. And RC comes to visit, uh, and there's kind of a lot of warning signs cropping up pretty fast, and a lot of it has to do with bugs. He believes there's bugs on him, they're crawling on him, and his theory about what they are, where they come from, where they actually are, how they got there, continually mutates and changes throughout the whole movie. And did he bring them in? Did RC bring them in? Are they in his skin? Are they in his are they under his skin? What the hell? Are they burrowing behind his tooth? His tooth hurts. And in one really intense scene, he rips his tooth out with pliers, just rips it out in the mirror. Extreme pain, a lot of screaming, and of course it's freaking her out. All of this is extremely realistically done. The camera work gets right up close with them, and a lot of times they'll start to say something and trail off, and it'll do this kind of jerky camera move, a lot like a found footage film, or a faux documentary kind of, where it'll kind of do this thing and go out of focus, kind of, and that kind of camera work, has become de rigueur. Um, Originally, and as I remembered, in found footage films, and eventually filtered into the mainstream as a mannerism. Comedies use it a lot. Comedies that are pseudo verite, like The Office, the American version, and of course Parks and Recreation. They use that kind of camera work constantly. So there's a bit of that in here, and it's weird seeing Friedkin wield it because he wields it like a master. I mean, it's like you're aware of it. It's self conscious, and yet I don't know. It has a verisimilitude. I'm not saying it makes it look like it's really happening or they're really being filmed. It's just as a device, he just kind of homes in on these details and kind of wavers, and then there he is. And there's a lot of times where he'll he'll home in on an inanimate object and just kind of go in and out on it, and then just hold, and it's like it slows the tempo down. He's a master of the tempo of this movie, of the flow of it. It's very natural feeling, and yet he is being very manipulative with the camera work. Um, Very impressive, really incredible. Just as virtuosic as the grandiosity of The Exorcist, or the over the top. nature to live and die in LA. Um, Maybe a little more akin to some of his sorcerer work, which also had some of that handheld verite camera work. But in that case, it was inspired by a lot of the handheld work of the European action films of the 70s. Um, so, uh, it's rough. It's rough. And she gets on his trip with him about the bugs. Of course, he's delusional. He keeps saying he sees it. She can't see it, but then she can finally see it. And it's really like he's transferring his madness to her. But I think in a way he's triggering something that's already in her. I mean, they're obviously codependent and unhealthy for each other. But let's step beyond the typical diagnosis of this kind of behavior or scenario in reality and look at it through their lens, and within their lens in this enclosed space, this one set, this hotel, rustic hotel, um, they are all either of them have, and she takes it a bit far. She gets mad at RC and who's trying to get her help, who genuinely is trying to get her help. Who's not really just hating on Peter wantonly. She liked him at first. It's like there's obviously something wrong here, and they both have some health problems. They're inflicting injuries on each other, trying to get rid of these bugs. They've started to get all this bug spray and these traps that hang from the ceiling, and eventually they cover. Well, on down the road, they cover the entire hotel walls and floors and ceilings with tinfoil, right? And because it jams the transmissions of the bugs to just bring more bugs. At least that's what Peter's told her. And she ended up becoming kind of an expert. So when she starts explaining this to other characters, the few there are, she's very versant in them. She's like very earnest and serious. So she's kind of found her calling here. It's really weird. It's like she was just kind of waiting, like a vessel to be uh, filled with the attention and knowledge of someone even more mentally unhealthy than her, who wouldn't leave her, and that's kind of, I think, tragically what's happening. And there's a guy named Dr. Sweet that apparently, according to Peter, experimented on him in the army, and you get into a lot of talk about uh, conspiracy theories. Not all of them just theories. I mean, some things are like they talk about the Tuskegee experiments. I mean, those were real, real dastardly deeds by the government experimenting on African Americans. Everything from that to like Timothy McVeigh's motivations, whether he was like a government psyop, and Kaczynski, they mention him, and um, there's a whole range and a lot of the stuff. And when Peter gets into that stuff and starts talking about it, he's very knowledgeable. He's very detailed. He's very, compelling in what he's saying. And it's kind of a mixture of things that are verifiably true, things that are conspiracy theories, that are possibilities. A lot of people have posited, and some have debunked. And then a lot of connections he makes on his own. Obviously Tracy Letts gets into this character. He knows a lot about this kind of mental illness and also about this kind of person that, studies the government experimenting on its own people, PSYOPs, CIA, MK Ultra, all this kind of stuff. And most of that stuff really did happen, contrary to what a lot of people don't want to believe, though a lot more people are beginning to believe it because it happened. But there's also the tinge of paranoia there, which puts what he's saying into question. So at all times, a lot of what he's saying is true, but a lot of what he's saying is totally pseudoscience. Some of it's real science stuff he's extrapolated. Peter, I mean, not Tracy Letts, but I guess him too by extension. I mean, he's a brilliant guy, but he's got that line between brilliance and madness. So how much of it is true? How much of it's real? And so you kind of get a window into that when this Dr. Sweet, who he said experimented on him, comes to see them. They let him in, and he's kind of a passive aggressive, snarky, know-it-all guy. he kind of reminds me of Clark Gregg as Agent Coulson in Shield. The guy, when you first see him, you kind of hate him. He's a little smug and annoying. He even kind of looks like him. Um, but as he talks, you wonder like what he's saying is real or not. I mean, he claims that at first he's kind of being truthful to Agnes, and I think, and he says, he's not a doctor. He basically says, I'm a federal agent. I've come to retrieve Peter. He spent 4 years in a mental hospital after being in the army, and the army institutionalized him. Then he escaped, and he maybe harmed himself and others. So all of that, I think, is probably true. And he's saying he wants to retrieve him. And she's, of course, spewing all the talking points that Peter has instilled in her. And of course, he's kind of cocky and incredulous at them, kind of mocking her, and that makes her even more angry and vehement and distrustful of him. Then he changes strategy, and he kind of tries to pull this. Hey, there's my buddy. He's guesting. He tries to feign being like on her side and believing her, and that he's not going to hurt Peter. He's just going to take him back. Everything's going to be okay. And then he kind of pulls this thing out of his hat, which is a little chilling and kind of breaks that wall between what is real and unreal and where you're not sure and where Agnes isn't sure. He mentions that if she helps him, he will help her find Lloyd, her missing son. Now, she, like us watching it, are like, how the hell do you know about Lloyd? I mean, how does he know about Lloyd? So, they've obviously been keeping tabs on him, Peter, incessantly and gathering intelligence. And so obviously they know everything about her, and he's using this as a talking point against her. But she believes it. Unfortunately, Peter comes in, and right before Dr. Sweet can give him a shot, Peter stabs him and stabs him and stabs him until he's dead. So he's gone, and she's angry because she's like, he's my only link to Lloyd. And then they begin kind of going over things together. And hey, buddy, my cat's trying to drink my tea. They go over everything together, like where did the bugs come from, and kind of how did the guy know about Lloyd and all this stuff. And so he begins manufacturing this as he's been through the whole movie. Peter manufacturing this scenario, and then he tells her to look into her brain, and she's like, maybe it's something I know that I don't know I know. So it's like buried in her subconscious, and he's like, keep going, pull it out. And it's basically her spitballing with him because she's descending into this kind of paranoid other reality, the psychosis with him, to where she's right on that wavelength. So that the kind of stuff he's spewing, she starts coming up with too. She's in sync with, even though she really doesn't have the background in that he does, factually, they're on the same wavelength psychologically. And finally, she arrives at the conclusion that it's all her fault and that she brought the bugs. And there must be, they talk about a drone and another bug, and he said all this kind of theory before, and she thinks it must have started when we made love, and then they hatched in you, and then they started, and so she's like, it must have been implanted in me, and the government took Lloyd, and then the government implanted these bugs in her, and then he was fated to meet her, and it was a trap for him. Oh my God. And then finally she just bursts out, I am the mother bug. I am the super mother bug. And that's that kind of like completely next level moment I was alluding to. It's crazy. Sorry, I keep saying that. I know it's probably indelicate to the subject matter, but I mean in a good way, in the sense that it's really out there. It is insane, but I mean insane in a brilliant way, like really breaking the boundaries of this kind of film. I mean, it's like a horror that's rooted in the extremes or the depths that the human mind can plumb. And so, coming on top of this revelation, they disrobe and pour gas, throw gasoline all over the whole place, and of course the dead guy's still there. And you actually see him in a shot at the very beginning. The dead guy in the foil place. That's like a quick shot before the credits. So it's like a flash forward, and you're out of context. You're like, what the hell? And then they pour it on each other. And he begins to light a fire, and then she's just her eyes, and then everything burns. Now, meanwhile, the guy who let Dr. Sweet into the place is her ex-boyfriend, ex-husband, the asshole Goss, and he's trying to beat down the door. He starts hearing them screaming after Peter's killed Dr. Sweet, and you see him outside just hitting the door. But inside, everything's shaking. The whole set's shaking. You hear all these alarms going off throughout the whole movie. Everything from like the air conditioner to the ceiling fan make you think of helicopters. And Dr. Sweet says, he acknowledges the sound of helicopters when he's with her. It says, "Yes, you've been watched." Okay, so is that true or is it not true? It's like, so I think they freak out thinking, okay, these helicopters are coming. Everybody's coming to destroy us because of what we know, and et cetera, et cetera. So we're just going to, destroy ourselves. And I mean, they even talk about a couple of times, like Jim Jones and Guyana as a locus point for these kind of ideas. And he says, "I love you," and she says, "I love you," and there goes the match. Like I said, everything goes up, it burns. That's the end, really. And wow, I mean, hey, everything's it moves really fast from the time that he kills the doctor straight to her revelation, I guess, about being the super mother bug, to the flame. And the camera work is crazy. It's spinning. It's this like they're taking the set and shaking it. I don't know, man. My conclusion is this is one of the most underrated genre films of the last 20 years at least, and definitely of this millennium. Why this didn't win like 5,000 awards, I don't know. Maybe it did win some awards. I need to do some research. I think it was nominated for some Saturn awards, the awards for genre, film and TV and stuff. But it's intense and it strikes a lot of chords. It's kind of dark. It has its moments of humor. It has it's compelling. It's hard to take your eyes off it. Like the proverbial traffic accident. It's very compelling, and all it is really is mainly these two intense actors in this one bizarre set dealing with this very strange material. And I think it's Friedkin's masterpiece. I gotta say, I really do. I think to take something like this late in his career and take chances with it, narratively, visually, totally non-commercial. And that takes guts, and he had the guts and the talent to make this happen. And I really wish it would come out in a super deluxe Blu-ray or even a bare bones Blu-ray. I just want to see a really beautiful print of this. It's beautifully shot. There's tons of blue lighting, which I'm a sucker for. That's dominant, actually, and becomes more dominant as the film goes on. So, Bug, highly recommended. So the next film I'm going to try not to take quite as long on, even though it's also kind of a deep, complex movie, but a very different kind of movie, and that is Dust Devil from 1992 by Richard Stanley, who I do consider a personal friend, even though I have not seen, I've not seen him in 4 years, but I haven't talked to him online in about a year and a half or so. He has a lot of personal difficulties right now, and I talked about them in another video. I can't remember what got me to that subject in the other video. Oh yeah, I reviewed Color Out of Space. So in that video, the Color Out of Space review, I talked a good bit about Richard. So I'm not going to retread all that again. But as we all know about Richard from the documentary Lost Soul, about his effort to shoot The Island of Dr. Moreau, which ended up becoming the John Frankenheimer film with Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer. He's had kind of a cursed career. Richard is a ritual magician. He is a very empathic and very mystical person. Brilliant guy, very independent-minded. He's just had a lot of luck. He's kind of like Kenneth Anger, a guy who has kind of lived in that other reality a lot, and this reality has not been so kind to them, and especially in matters of finance and things like that, and getting projects finished. And I get it, and I think Dust Devil is one of the greatest things that he has finished, that he has completely wrought. But at the time, it kept getting cut. He was dealing with the Weinsteins, because that was the period where they were beginning to distribute a lot of stuff, right on the cusp of their, or at the same time as their dealings with like Tarantino and Kevin Smith began, and Robert Rodriguez. Robert Rodriguez kind of came last of those, but Reservoir Dogs had come out. Clerks, so 92 is between Reservoir Dogs and Clerks on their timeline, and they were already an ascendant company, but they were beginning to reap the kind of quirkier and more independent material, and they made a lot of money off it. They kind of rode that wave through the 90s and used that money to put out a lot of good foreign films and re-releases like Belle de Jour, and they did a lot of stuff. But of course, we know one of them was kind of, being a dastardly, pervert behind the scenes, unfortunately. But that doesn't invalidate the work, because they didn't do the work. They enabled the work financially. So, I don't think anyone should be like, I support Me Too, therefore I'm not going to watch Dust Devil. That's kind of a reach. Even Richard didn't really like the Weinsteins. I mean, they kind of tried to screw him over, by, I mean, they liked him having an idiosyncratic film and a genre film, but they thought it was too long. They cut out a lot of the meat of it, the stuff that makes it elevated to another level. It was a very commercial decision. So he finally fought and got his original 120-minute cut. He finally got it to 110 minutes. And even though it didn't come out in that form on home video in America or theatrically here or in Britain, the DVD did eventually come out with the final cut, which he had devised. It's really 108 and a half minutes, but that's essentially the 110-minute cut. So that came out in a big box set with a bunch of his documentaries and a whole bunch of essays and a Dust Devil comic book, and a lot of overseen by Richard through this company called Subversive. I don't know if they're still making DVDs or Blu-rays or whatever anymore. I assume, as with the struggle to get the movie made, the movie finished, the movie in its right form, onto VHS and onto DVD, the struggle continues, and who knows when it's going to come out on Blu-ray. That could be another whole uphill battle of another decade. So that's why I think it's going to be, maybe likely we'll see a Bug Blu-ray in the near future, since a studio Lionsgate distributed it. But I don't know about Dust Devil. But I have the big set, and it has the final cut. It also has the work print in there. That's interesting too. So what the hell is Dust Devil about? I do want to cheat a little. Excuse me. It's not the company. I'm not bored with you guys. You may be bored with me. I mean, which I'd understand. I just want to make sure I get a couple of these names right, even though I've seen this movie a zillion times. We are talking about a South African production, and some of the characters have some interesting names, some unusual names. So it starts with this actor named John Machakiza. He plays this character named Joe Nemon, who's also the narrator, or you could say that Joe Nemon is the narrator. He is like a shaman. Actually, they one article that I encountered mentions kind of what he is. Yeah, and I don't know this term, and I was trying to see if here you go. There is a Sangoma. So it's a traditional healer of Southern Africa. Spiritual healing, divination, rituals, he's a mystic, he's a sage, he's a shaman. But he owns this now abandoned movie theater. And the guy's got a great voice, the actor. And his narration's fantastic, and he talks about it began with the red light, you know, and he talks about the wind and this kind of demonic presence, which is a dust devil. Um, and he's like, it spread its wings and flew like a bird, and he's like, got the sand in his hands. One of his hands is missing half of his pinky. And at one point, he tells the lead character, there's power in fingers, in knuckles. He goes, if you had a fistful of knuckles, you could win a war. Um, he's a really bizarre character. He's got a lot of capped and filled teeth, and one of his eyes is kind of lazy here, and he's very dark black eye, and he's got a cool kind of turban like that, and a flannel shirt and pants, and uh, he talks about how one night he first met Ben Mokarab, who is really the hero. He's played by Zakes Mokai, who was in Serpent in the Rainbow and other films. Um, and he talks about the first night I met Ben Mokarab. We were having a beer, the bird with the crystal plumage. And I can't remember the other movie, but he's somehow terrific. A double bill it was. So, Richard is obsessed with Dallas and Argento. So, um, there's just all kinds of sly things in here like that, and interesting in that he filmed it all in Namibia, in South Africa, which was a hard thing to do, but he got it done. So it's very authentic. The landscape is beautiful. There's a lot of long shots. There's a lot of incredible camera work. Some of it I bet it was very risky, like with helicopters and dollies and, basically pullaways where you go way back and see the whole landscape, even one where you see the whole mountains. The soundtrack by Simon Boswell is incredible. It's very evocative of spaghetti westerns, something Richard's very into. And the Dust Devil, the killer, the main antagonist, titular antagonist, the Dust Devil is a white man abroad in South Africa, and he's kind of a handsome, chiseled-looking white guy played by Robert John Burke, who mainly is known for substituting for Peter Weller in RoboCop 3, but you can see his face in that really. But the Dust Devil dresses though like a spaghetti western character, like an old cowboy with the duster and the hat. And the music is evocative at times of like more Ennio Morricone, Once Upon a Time in the West. And the Dust Devil is like a hitchhiker, and he has a lot of odd affectations. He puts his head to the pavement to sense someone coming, and he holds out his hand, and you see kind of the light go through it, and his hand looks a little distorted. All of this is because he isn't human. He's a demonic presence that has become bound to a human host whose soul is long gone. You don't fully make that connection until the end, especially the very end where he jumps hosts after being seemingly destroyed. And basically, he picks up these women, and I mean, he kills some men too, but as far as his serial killings are women, they're lonely, they're suicidal. And his first one, he has sex with her. It's pretty graphic, and then he snaps her neck while they're having sex, kills her, severs her spinal cord at her neck. They show him pulling out the knife, and they describe later the action. They don't actually show the severing, but it is a very, very gory movie. And he dismembers her. He paints the walls with her blood and with other substances, these ritualistic, crazy drawings of demons, sets everything on fire, drives away, and there's kind of a spiral going out of the parking lot, and he kind of drives away in her Volkswagen in a spiral. And that spiral is important because at the movie theater, Joe Neiman is laying the rocks. Help me lay the rocks. He's laying the rocks, and it's a spiral. And you pull away, you see him in the middle of it, like a magic circle of protection. And Ben goes to Joe, and he's like, what is happening here? And basically, Joe's like, too bad you don't believe in this bullshit. But he's like, doesn't matter if I believe in it. I want to know what it means. And Joe tries to help him. He's like his spirit guide. He's kind of like ours with his narration. incredible, indelible character and actor. I need to look up that actor and see what became of him. He is just amazing. Quite a find of Richards, I gotta say. I mean, Zakes Mokai was a professional actor that I was familiar with, but I don't know about this John Mastig, whatever his name is, who plays Joe Neiman. But just such an interesting location and juxtaposition of cultures and ideas and influences. Tons of authentic occultism, and so Ben goes on this quest, and he's haunted in his dreams by his wife who left him 15 years ago. He's haunted by the woman who I mentioned, the first woman we see get murdered, even though they've never met. There's a German lady who's a forensic doctor who analyzes her remains, that woman. And she's an interesting actress. I mean, and I think she's a Dutch South African. And, she goes into the whole thing about witchcraft and Satanism. And again, it's kind of like, it doesn't really matter if they believe or not, but maybe it's real anyway. I mean, I remember one conspiracy theory book I read years ago, William Cooper, where he says, it doesn't matter if you believe any of this stuff and what the goals of these people are, the conspirators. If they believe it, though, they're dangerous to you. So that's kind of the basic idea, but it is real. He is a demon. Needlelap, I can't pronounce it. I'd have to spell it for you. It's the name of the real demon, the real dust devil legend. And so then comes in the next major character, and Wendy. She is a South African woman. The actress is actually American, which I didn't know until I read about this the other day. She's American. She does a great accent. Her name's Chelsea Field. She currently plays on this NCIS, one of these NCIS spinoff shows with Scott Bakula, who is her husband, and they've been together almost 20 years. I don't know what she looks like nowadays or sounds like, but she's really good in this. She's slim, beautiful. She was like a model in real life before she became an actor. She was like a solid gold dancer in the 80s before this. But anyway, she's quite good, and her husband, Mark Robinson's played by a South African guy. I forgot the name of the actor. And he's really kind of an asshole. He's really an annoying guy. As a husband, he's like, you're jealous of everything, reads into everything. He's not really abusive, but he does hit her once, and he does get really heated, but then he's like, I'm sorry. And really, he talks a lot of shit, and then he backs down every time. In every scenario with her, he does it. And then when he goes she leaves him and goes, basically she's going to go straight out to the sea in this little car. And there's a town named Bethany near the sea. And she's just going to like find herself. At first she's trying to call him and he doesn't get the call. And, and then she's like trying to write him a letter. And, it's all like, Mark, I need you, but I need to find myself. But then finally it's kind of like, I can't come back to you. I'm going to keep going. And, he doesn't get in these messages, but he does get trace the phone call of the answering machine and takes off to find her. And one of the town that she called him from, she's already left and she's picked up Dust Devil hitchhiking. And so they're together a while. Mark comes to the bar where she called him from, and he's the only white guy there, and he's like just not listening to anything they're saying. They're all saying that we haven't seen her, we don't know, and he's like, surely you'll remember if a white woman came in here. She's my wife, and he's getting all flipped out. And then he shows him the wedding picture, and he's in a uniform, like, you a policeman? And he's like, no, man, I was in the military. And the guy's like, do you support South Africa? And he's like, yes, of course I do. He's like, will you take this, South Africa? And they beat the living shit out of him. And it just seems well-deserved at that point. It's like, seriously, a white guy in 1989, when this is set, is going into an all-black area in South Africa and just talking smack and like, "Where's my wife? Surely you saw a white woman. I support South Africa." What an idiot! How tone deaf. So he makes his way out of this, and every time he kind of like gets scared and backs down. And of course, he finally runs into Ben Mokarab, who is kind of finally on the trail of what's going on. And meanwhile, Wendy, of course, has kind of fallen for the handsome stranger, and they have sex, and but uh, she discovers one of his little boxes of fingers. She loves to collect the fingers, like Joe Neiman said. There's pouting fingers, and she's flipping out, and so he gets ready to kill her with his knife, and he says, I should have done this a couple of days ago, but I get lonely, and in this body is kind of what he's saying. This vessel has needs, emotional, physical, sexual needs, and so she knocks the hell out of him and uh, tries to get away. And of course, you start to finally see that he's able to shape change. He never fully shape shifts, but his face changes into different demonic forms. Of course, he uses some of his powers. He makes her cargo all wonky and crashed. And then he becomes a pileup, and there's a truck, and the gas is leaking. And some of the guys start talking again. These white South African guys start talking shit to the Dust Devil, and he just throws his lighter into the oil. And that happens in a lot of movies I watch lately, I've noticed. And damn, everything blows up. But Wendy makes it out. She's pretty tough, and she finally gets to this. She's kind of hurt her ankle getting out of her car, and she just hobbles through the desert. She's in this dress, kind of barely clad, and these sandals, and limping around, and she just keeps walking through the desert. And meanwhile, Mokarab has run into Mark. He picks him up, and of course, Mark pisses him off. And Ben's got a shotgun, and they do see the Dust Devil moving towards trying to find Wendy. I mean, this thing can, I guess, fly and everything else. Again, his face is kind of distorted. The makeup isn't 100%, but it gets the point across that he's not human. And Mark starts talking smack to Ben, and he's like, "You better take me to my wife. I'll shoot you." And he shoots him. I mean, he tries to shoot him, and the gun has no bullets. And Ben takes the bullets out of his pocket, and he's like, "You think I'm stupid? I've been doing this 15 years. You think I'd let a guy like you fuck things up for me?" And he's like, "Come on, man. I just want my wife." And he gets scared when Ben holds a gun on him. And Ben makes him, I'm sorry, I'm just getting too much pleasure out of this. He makes him handcuff him to the truck, so he can't get away. There's no way he can get away from this without cutting his hand off, I guess. And my cat's making some strange sounds. And so Ben keeps going, and runs into Wendy, and they're in the desert, and they see this kind of town, this abandoned, these buildings where sand is it's almost like been flooded, like it's sinking into the sand. And Ben goes into one of the buildings, and like a phone is ringing, and he's hearing these kind of weird things along the electrical lines, like his wife's voice calling him. He's had this kind of problem before in the movie, in addition to those dreams. And I don't think the Dust Devil is doing it per se, but I do think it's like he's tangled up in these magical forces that are, his own past is haunting him, and as in some other detective stories I've seen, especially of the supernatural variety, it's like he's trying to by finding the killer of that first woman and these different people, he's trying to I don't know, make up for losing his wife, even though she left him. But he's trying to kind of still that voice inside of him that's gnawing at him, that guilt, that unresolved feeling. And of course, by now, he and his boss had done the research and realized that these murders had been going on as far back as 1908. So obviously, we are dealing with something supernatural. He should have listened to Joe Neiman. And Joe Nemon did give him a staff, this little staff, and he says, if you can put this across the step of the being, you can lock it temporarily into this plane, make it vulnerable, make its human body vulnerable. And so he carries the thing in his pocket, even though, like he said, he doesn't believe in this bullshit, but it doesn't matter if he believes it. So he's in there with his rifle, and unfortunately, the hitchhiker comes upon him first and stabs him, practically disembowels him, and you think that's the end of Ben. And but he had already given Wendy the gun with the bullets that he got from Mark, and she threatens to shoot him, and then she gets like Ben's rifle, and he's going for Wendy, and of course he's saying stuff like "I love you, Wendy," and he's trying to fuck with her mind, and he talks about how he's not responsible for these killings. Everybody wants to die. And there is a scene at the hotel around the time she makes love to him while she's in the bathroom, and she does take a razor to her wrist and almost cuts it. So in a way, yeah, he's seeking out what he's sensing, these women who want to die. They're alone and they're seeking death. They're seeking, succor and solace and sex, but they're also wanting to die, and like according to him, they're calling him. It's not his fault, they want to die. He's a smooth talker, this guy, but he can't really talk his way out of what happens. He starts to go to kill Wendy, and Mokarab is barely alive, and he puts the staff across the threshold and roots the guy in his spot, and she blows his head like completely off, a million pieces, body twitches. Ben dies, and then she just sets out across the desert, and she runs into Mark, and Mark's like, Wendy, let me out. I'm trying to find you. And she turns the rifle on him without saying anything. And of course, he's like, no. And then she leaves him. And so I guess he's just going to die in the desert locked to this car. She just keeps going, and then she begins hitchhiking, and she puts her head down to the asphalt. And then you have Joe Nemon's narration, and it's like, when she looks in the mirror now, she sees him looking back at her. So I assume that the hitchhiker body was destroyed, and his soul, the dust devil, went into Wendy. So now she's the dust devil. She's wandering around, and it's incredible. I mean, I was reading some reviews of the movie that were contemporary to it coming out, and then since then. And Kim Newman's was especially curious. I mean, he was a bit critical, and then they said that he watched it again years later, and he said that it actually is a very considered and remarkable piece. And I'm like, don't get too excited, Kim. Calm down, buddy. I mean, don't give it too much credit there. He's like Mr. Dry and about things and whatever. Yeah, he was one of the first film writers I really got into, but I got to say, I mean, sometimes he works my nerve. And then other reviews were like, yeah, it's beautifully shot, but extremely pretentious. And I was like, wow, okay. So, you can't have horror that's ambitious or has a lot to say or is authentically, its occultism is authentic and it's exploring other cultures, or is pretentious. It's just overblown. Fuck that. And so I don't know. But I think the consensus generally now is, especially since this DVD got distributed several years ago, is that this is kind of a masterpiece. At least that's my consensus. I mean, ironically, the place that really made me want to see Dust Devil was the Overlook Encyclopedia of Horror, and Kim Newman was one of the main writers. I guess he didn't write the review I read because it was very positive, and it was basically saying that it had been cut and recut, and it was underrated. And this was like 1993. I read this, or 94. And mind you, the movie came out on video in 93. I used to see the really cut, the 85-minute cut version at Cockbuster Video for rent. I didn't rent it because, actually that was 93. Yes, I didn't rent it because I'd read that it was so cut. And I was like, no, I'm just going to wait. I didn't realize I'd have to wait like 12 more years, but that's okay. Um, I think a friend of mine did have a print of it that I saw. Probably the Mark Baranowski had a nearly uncut print I saw around 1998. But I didn't really see a nice print until I got this DVD. Um, but yeah, I mean, 110 minutes is the uncut. The 108.5 minutes, that's the uncut version. The director's cut, Richard's final cut. 85 minutes is what Miramax ended up with. I mean, he gave them a 120-minute cut and they came back with 85 minutes. So, basically the wine scenes were like, 35 minutes of dialogue and character development. Who needs that shit, man? It's not punchy like Tarantino, man. So anyway, I love this movie, and I wanted to share my love of it. It gets better every single time I see it. The characters are rich. The setting, the concepts, the plot, everything about it is just really unique and special. It really kind of it is a genre film, though sometimes Richard himself says it isn't quite a horror film, but just has elements of it. It's definitely a horror film, most definitely, but it's so much more too. I mean, to me, it's one of those supernatural films that is steeped in genuine occultism and genuine magic, and you learn a lot. You want to learn more about these cultures and these concepts, and that's cool. So anyway, I'm going to bow out. This is my longest by far Halloween segment. Unless my next one, which will be my last one, is longer. I don't know. Hopefully not. We'll see. It's going to be a very special 12th episode, and I don't know when I'll record it, but it should be up at the latest by midnight, November 2nd, going into November 2nd, which will be All Souls Day, I guess. Is that right? Day of the Dead. So, anyway, take care, and I'll see you soon. Please subscribe. Please thumbs up. Please thumbs up. I would love you forever.